The coronavirus pandemic has wholesale changed the way we deliver and access healthcare. Before the pandemic, only about 5 to 10% of appointments were done via the phone or online. Now it's closer to about 95%. This is great for doctors and for you, because for you it's probably easier to get an appointment, you don't need to waste time coming to clinic, and you don't need to wait in a waiting room. For us also, it's generally more efficient too. One of the downsides though is that we can't diagnose as quickly. Remember, most communication is non-verbal. The way you gesticulate, walk, sit down, limp, clench your teeth or furrow your brows all say something about you and your health. And it's not quite the same through phone or even video. Below are 5 conditions and their telltale signs only in the flesh that I can diagnose before you even sit down. Oddly enough, patients with low mood take longer to walk to the clinic room than those without. This is subtle, but what's not so subtle with patients suffering depression is the lack of eye contact. It's really unusual to walk into a room with only one other person in it and avoid their gaze. It's more than this though. The way a depressed person walks is different too. It's more slow, more lumbering with hunched shoulders, and their face usually says it all. Within about 10 seconds of starting these types of consultations, patients that are depressed are usually in tears. Nowadays, I consciously reach for the tissues before patients even sit down to let them know that I know it's going to be one of those conversations. People with low mood think they do a good job of hiding their feelings, and often they do, but when you see 5 depressed patients a day, you get pretty good at spotting it a mile off. And to be honest, we all can. The real tragedy is that most of us probably see it or notice it in other people, but we're just too distracted by our own worlds and our own lives, and we don't ask or inquire. If you thought now for just 5 seconds, you could probably easily think of 1 or 2 people that are probably low or even depressed. The walk gives this one away. When you've got a genuinely swollen testicle, it's hard not to limp or measure your steps. This type of patient, of course, is always a male, and the other telltale sign is the sheepish, pained look. The kind of look that says, "My friends are making fun of me," or "this really hurts, just please fix it." A swollen testicle like this can affect any male at any age, and it's a curious thing how men approach an intimate examination. Almost always, the younger they are, the more painfully shy and introverted and worried they are. Getting your junk out as a teenager in front of a stranger is in the same embarrassment category as probably soiling yourself at school. It's not easy. However, the older you get, the funnier they tend to find the symptom and the more relaxed they are with the examination as well as their own body. I've had grown men literally unzipping themselves before they've even said hello. Accessing healthcare is a personal thing as an adult. There aren't many instances when a man and woman come into clinic together. If they're of childbearing age, 9 times out of 10, it's probably because they want to start a family and they're struggling. These conversations tend to go on for ages. First, there's 2 people with 2 sets of questions. There's investigations for both the man and the woman to be arranged, blood tests, semen tests, scans. And it's also a very delicate issue with anxious and almost always very serious patients, not to mention the very strict rules on accessing government funding for fertility treatment. This is a really good example of when something is incredibly urgent for the patient, quite literally in the form of a biological clock, but not so much for the healthcare system. If a man and woman comes to clinic and they're not of childbearing age, i.e. the woman is over 50, 9 times out of 10, a wife is usually worried about their husband's health, that they're stressed or overworked or worried they may have cancer or something. Most of the time, the husband is quite nonchalant about their health. And in these cases, I tend to go in all a little guns blazing to scare them out of their complacency. This is exactly the type of patient you don't see until they have a massive heart attack or they end up in the morgue. It's often the one chance I get to make a big difference. And it can do. People can be remarkably affected by a short conversation with a healthcare professional. It's one of our most underrated superpowers: earnest, evidence-based advice. Most people, once reminded of their mortality, can usually find at least one thing to improve on. And sometimes that's enough. I don't want to give the impression that I can diagnose cancer before you sit down, because I can't. Besides, cancer is a massive term covering everything from dangerous skin lesions to blood conditions to solid cancers like bowel, breast and lung cancer. What I really mean here is that every now and again a patient will walk in and I'll take one look at them and immediately I'll know that they're seriously unwell. And I don't mean an acute type of unwell where you have a fever and you're sweaty and you can't get out of bed type unwell. That's different. That's an infection and it usually resolves. I mean the type of unwell that slowly unfolds. It's written in the sunkenness of the eyeballs, the tautness of the skin, the slightly grimaced expression on the face. I've seen it countless times, and more often than not, unfortunately, it usually tends to be a cancer. Not everyone with cancer or serious disease presents like this, though. It can be subtle and sometimes it can be really florid. Either way, if you have any of the issues mentioned today, whether or not your doctor can diagnose it before you sit down, do reach out if you're unsure what's going on or you need help. Thank you so much for watching. Till next time, stay healthy.